Hello, I'm Ed Spicer, and this is www.spicyreads.org. Today I interview Mitali Perkins at the Cooperative Children's Book Center at the University of Wisconsin in Madison.
Hello,
Thanks for stopping by.
Welcome to www.spicyreads.org. Would you please tell my viewers a little bit about what you've written?
It's good to be here. I've actually written several different books. I've written some novels set in other countries, and I've written some novels set here that explore the between cultures experience. So I started out with the Sunita Experiment, which is set fully in California. Then Monsoon Summer takes my readers to India. Back again here with the First Daughter books, back to the bicultural life. And then overseas again to Bangladesh with Rickshaw Girl, and to Burma with Bamboo People, and to India with Secret Keeper, which is also historical fiction.
Okay, now a friendly young woman from Kolkata?
Yes.
How did you get to, say, Burma?
I like the young woman part. That's good. Well, we lived along the Thai-Burma border for 3 years in Chiang Mai, Thailand, and visited the refugee camps along the border. And I heard the stories of these kids who were fleeing the army, and I wanted to write the story. So that's how I became aware of their situation.
Yes, and it's a wonderful book, Bamboo People. I highly recommend it. I reviewed it for Michigan Reading Journal. You are very well known. In fact, I'm here today with you in Madison, Wisconsin, where you've just presented a session on multicultural literature. What are the common errors from new writers or old writers when they start to write a book about a multicultural situation?
Well, I've made many mistakes myself, so I'd say I'm learning from my own mistakes. There are several traps, but I always encourage writers to just give it a try. I think it's worse not to try than to actually try and make a mistake, because we can always admit our mistakes and move forward as writers. Hopefully we'll have a career, we'll improve and grow, so I don't think there's ever any danger of making the fatal mistake when you try to write a wide array of characters in your book. I'd say the biggest mistake probably is not doing enough research. I talk about 3 things that you need to write a story that crosses borders. One is research, the next is empathy, and the third is imagination. I feel that some errors I've seen are based on not thorough research. Others are based on perhaps not enough personal connection with the culture. Or I've heard someone say that if you're going to write a story that crosses borders, you need to cross the border first yourself and stay there long enough to be able to hold a bunch of babies, and then
I love that.
really be silent and not talk and listen to their stories for a long time. There's a power gap between you and the people you're writing about, because storytelling is an act of power. So I think not recognizing that and maybe crossing a border too quickly and asking yourself, am I the person to tell the story? I want to tell it, but maybe there's somebody that's a little closer to the culture that could have some shelf space. Shelf space is very limited these days, so maybe asking yourself that question before you venture is a good one to ask.
Yeah.
But I would encourage writers of all shapes, sizes, and colors to write about kids of all shapes, sizes, and colors.
I love that aspect of not being afraid to make a mistake, because one of the things I sense in the world of young adult and children's literature are those folks that really start to include other characters from other cultures, other situations, and then they freeze. They're afraid they don't have the qualifications to do it.
Right. Well, as I said, that sets up an apartheid system within fiction, that you have to have the right ethnic credentials to write. I hold that in one hand, no apartheid in storytelling. On the other hand, I say, walk carefully. When you're crossing borders to tell a story, you better do it with a lot of humility.
The other thing that I appreciate about what you've said is that, you know, if you screw up, say so. But do you find that authors are really willing to say, I blew it?
Yes, I think that it's hard enough, though, you know, to when everybody else is criticizing you, to be your own worst critic. But I think I'd like to see more of that. I'd like to see more of us saying, well, what would we have changed about each of our books now that it's 10 years from now? It'd be great to have a blog or somebody hosting that kind of conversation for authors. You know, your book came out 10 years ago. It won this and that prize. Is there anything you'd change now about that
Right.
book? That's a good question to ask, and I think we all should reflect on that, because we too are learning and growing. I read an article about the guy who wrote Tintin in the Congo. You know, the movie's coming out now, so there's some attention on it, and he actually was very, as the years went on, he was quite concerned about the aspect of the colonial picture in that book, and he did not like his own book, Tintin in the Congo. He ended up hoping that it would not be published again.
What about reader responses to your books that have both surprised you, pleased you, shocked you, horrified you, and the like?
Right. Well, I shouldn't be, but I'm always surprised when I get letters, especially with my books that are set so far away, from kids that are growing up in rural parts of America who are not exposed to other cultures. But then I get these beautiful letters from them where they've really connected with the stories. The reason I'm surprised is because sometimes I hear from adults that kids they're serving will not necessarily relate to my books. So when I hear from adults saying that, and then I get the letters from the kids, there's a disconnect.
I noticed on your blog you were talking about the cover for Bamboo People. Tell our viewers about that cover and why it's so unique with your books.
It's about a soldier, a boy who's forced to fight. It's a very attractive picture of a Burmese young man that they were able to get from stock photos. He was dressed in a uniform and he was carrying a rifle. It was quite compelling. Librarians felt that that would be a tough sell to have that violent of an image on the school. Librarians felt that, so they took the cover off, and then they put what's on there now are two boys, their silhouettes against barbed wire.
How many covers have you had with boys?
This is my first one.
Is this your first boy voice?
This is my first boy voice.
And how did it feel being a boy?
Well, I have sons, and that was, I don't think that I could have crossed that border, the gender border, as boldly if I didn't grow up with two boys. I think it would have been harder for me to take that risk. But because I have my sons and I love them so dearly, and I grew up watched them grow up, I think I had the courage to write that. I read aloud to those boys nonstop, even to the point where they were 15 years old and playing their video games, and I was reading aloud to them as they played. I'd stop and I'd say, "So what just happened?" And they knew exactly what happened in the book. So
yeah, multitasking.
Yes, they could do that somehow miraculously. Their brains could kill aliens and read stories at the same time.
I think you'd have to be like living under a big rock or in a big, deep, dark cave not to know about your fire escape. But tell that one reader about your fire escape blog.
I started it about, I think, 6 years ago. I used to climb out on the fire escape when we lived in New York with my 7 library books and my sweet tart candies, and it was a safe place for me. There was the stress of being from a culture that was different than the majority culture, and all the tensions of growing up between cultures. It was fiery, and outside was just blue skies and red railings and great stories and sweet tart candies and peace and that safety that stories bring, the way that stories can be a fire escape for us. So I wanted to create a safe place to talk about some of these issues of race and culture. I feel like they're so fraught with tension. There's a place where they can be heard and express themselves and disagree with a great amount of civility and courtesy. That's my goal.
Okay, what new projects are coming out from the fingers of Mitali Perkins?
I'm working on a anthology of humor, and I'm editing it for Candlewick. It's called Open Mic. And we wanted to look at the what it's like to grow up on the margins of life in North America, whether it be class, race, or caste, or whatever it is. Use the humorous voice. So I've recruited several great writers like Naomi Shihab Nye and Francisco Stork and Varian Johnson and several other writers that have agreed to participate in this. I can't give you the full list yet. I'm not supposed to reveal the full list, but those are some names to whet your appetite. I also have one spot open.
Those are good names.
I have one spot that I'm reserving for anybody. I want to read funny. And I'm accepting submissions for the anthology from anybody who's interested in writing. And I'm really excited to showcase that with humor. I think humor has this power to process stuff in safety, that if we laugh about things together, we can talk about them in a different way than if we're all intense and full of passion and our secret, our intense convictions. That humor really allows us to have the conversation.
Okay, Mitali Perkins. Thank you so much for appearing on www.spicyreads.org.
Thank you so much, Ed.
See ya.
See ya.
That was Mitali Perkins speaking with me, Ed Spicer, at www.spicyreads.org. After her presentation at the International Children's Literature Conference at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. We did this video at the Cooperative Children's Book Center. Thank you, KT, and thank you, Mitali. It was a pleasure getting to talk to you this weekend. Bye.